tu zan zong zan chung loi pathian na ko pek mi. Sorry bakse. Zan chung loi ko pek mi pathian amin thang ta ko se. Atu ko thok la na hin kan nu lupa sina hin ke he ka lai ho zong he akling pa lo cha khan thi thiam na thi thiam ding kan non ha tu mi kha ka chim tu mi khat na ka se. Atu zong ko thok chang ko le. Hello kids. How are you guys? Good, that's good. Okay, so tonight, as you can see from behind me, I've prepared a very short sharing slash testimony with you guys, and I hope that you guys can gain some encouragement from it. And so, before we begin, I'd like to give a little short introduction. So, like many of you guys, I was born a Christian, right? My entire life, I was raised a Christian. I went to church weekly. I read my Bible. I Bible even Saturday, I would go to Saturday boom too. And tolom bekton. What else? I used to sing for the glory of God, right? So my childhood was very, very much Christian based, and it was revolved around Christianity, mainly because of my parents. My parents were, and are still very devout Christians. As you guys know, my dad is pastor, reverend, and my mom did a lot of CECM teaching over her years. So this entire time that I've been living, I've kind of had this identity that I am this girl who is so full of Jesus. I mean, in 2022, at just the age of 14, I had already given up my life to Christ, right? And I guess that kind of shows just how early on I was exposed to Christianity. But even after all that, even after all these good deeds that I would do, I still face so many moments of trouble, of struggle, trials and tribulations, suffering, as we might call it, negative experiences, negative circumstances, right? And there was this one particular moment in my life where I had felt so alone. I had felt so lonely, and I had felt so isolated from everyone. And sure, on the outside, I was still talking to my friends. I was still talking to my peers. I was still talking to my parents, my family, my brothers. I still talked to them like normal. But deep inside, I felt like I had no one. Like I felt so alone. The actual feeling, maybe some of you guys have felt it, but I hope you guys understand soon or sooner or later, because this feeling, it was so raw and so negative that it plagues my mind. I started thinking, why am I so alone? Why does everyone hate me? Why does no one like me? Why do I feel like my friends hate me? Why do I feel like they're talking behind my back? Right? And so I felt so alone. And then, sure, sometimes so a couple months after I like this spur of feeling started happening, I confided into one of my friends, so some of my close friends, and I told them, look, this is what I'm struggling with. I feel so alone. I feel like no one's really there for me. And even though they gave me great advice and they gave me such comfort, it felt empty almost. And that's not to downplay any of their comforting words or advice that they gave me, but rather just shows how we as humans will never be complete without Jesus. And so when my friends would tell me, oh, it's okay how you're feeling, I understand how you're feeling, I felt like they didn't understand. And actually, it felt worse when they would tell me, oh, I understand how you're going, what you're going through, what you're feeling. And I never really got the closure or the answer that I was looking for. And for months, I tell you, for months, I was asking God, if you love me so much, like the Bible says, Why do I have to go through these negative circumstances, these negative experiences, such hardships in my life, even at a young age? Even though I've been showing you that I've been such a good Christian, right? Like at the start, when I was introducing myself, I said that I had gone to church weekly, even 2 times a week, Saturday night boom and Sunday boom. So why did I have to go through such hardships if through my actions I had already shown that I was a Christian, right? Like I was so devout. So why did I have to go through that? And so the one night I was just over it, okay? This is just one of my testimonies, but for this particular one, I was so over it. I was so over feeling alone, feeling like the world hated me. And as much as it sounds corny, I'm sure a lot of us can feel that way because it's so prevalent in our life. It's so prevalent in our world right now. Self doubt, self hate, that is so prevalent in our world, especially for us younger generations. That kind of negative mindset plagues us and makes us think that we are not enough, we are not good enough, we're not worthy of being saved, of talking and mending our relationship with God. That's what's plaguing us, and that's what's preventing us from seeking the very relationship that God wants with you. Because I'll just say this. This one I didn't plan on saying, but your relationship with God is like this. You and God standing here, right? And you're constantly walking away to do worldly things, to do sins, because it's in our nature, it's in our very nature to sin. But the beautiful thing, I want you to know this, is that as you're constantly walking this way, in the other direction, God doesn't move, right? The distance between you guys is not created by God, but by you, right? And so what I'm saying, what I'm trying to get at is that for the younger generations, this self-doubt and all these self-hate and all these kind of negative thoughts about yourself, oh, my friends hate me, oh, my friends are talking bad about me, that kind of stuff prevents us from actually mending the discord between our relationship with God. Okay, so one night, like I said, I was over it. I was over feeling alone. I was over feeling isolated. So what do? I go on my laptop. I go on Google, AI overview, whatever. I go, why do we Christians suffer, right? I put that into Google. And actually, I put in Bible verses about why we as Christians suffer. And it gave me a long list of Bible verses to read about suffering as Christians. And so I just picked the first one because I was kind of lazy. But I picked the first one, and it was Romans chapter 8:28. And it goes like this. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, I want to highlight the part where it says, all things work together for good. That highlights that God works not just in isolated moments, but also for our good, for our eternal good. But this also doesn't mean that all things that happen to us is good, right? Because that's what it's insinuating, but it's not. Why? Why do all things that happen to us, why are some bad? Or why do we consider it bad? Because evil is so prevalent in our world. But what's beautiful about this, not about evil being prevalent, but what's so beautiful is that God is able to turn every circumstance around, every trial, every tribulation, every struggle, every trouble of yours around like this for your and our eternal good. But it's also important to remember that God, he doesn't work for our validation or our happiness. He works to fulfill his purpose. So it became clear to me after realizing that God works to fulfill his purpose in every circumstance, in every trial and tribulation. It became clear that this my circumstance of isolation and my circumstance of loneliness wasn't caused by God himself, but he saw fit that I should endure it to see and realize the purpose that he placed within it. And so this Bible verse behind me just gave me a whole new perspective. It gave me a whole new mindset on how I viewed our trials and tribulations, how I viewed our struggles. So tonight I want to share with you two fairly simple reasons as to why we as Christians go through suffering, go through pain that resonates with my personal experience. Now, this topic of suffering and suffering for Christ is a very, very difficult topic. And it's difficult in that it is so complex. You have to unpack so many things to understand the core reason as to why we suffer. But I want to give you guys two reasons that you guys could possibly remember as to why we suffer. So, the first reason is that it highlights our dependency. It highlights how utterly dependent we are on God, right? We aren't, this Bible verse here reminds us that we aren't left to our own worldly resources to cope with our problems, okay? So for me, it could have been so easy for me to turn during my moments of feeling isolated and alone, to turn to worldly things, to sinful things. And I'm going to admit I did. I did turn to worldly things and sinful things that that gave me a false promise, okay? And this false promise was that, oh, you're going to feel good about yourself now. You're going to feel like you're not alone anymore. You're not going to feel isolated anymore. You're going to feel better, right? It gave me this false promise. And suffering, I want to highlight as well, suffering doesn't ultimately create dependency, yeah? Rather, suffering highlights our dependency. And it highlights our dependent nature as humans that we have always had. From the very moment that we came into existence, we've depended on God for life, for breath, for food, for water, for all these good things. So why wouldn't we also depend on him for bad things? If we're depending him for good things, then we should also depend on him for bad things, right? But like many of us, I fell to this thought, to this negative, tempting thought that, oh, I am not worthy of depending on God for my struggles and to cope. So I turned to false promises, I turned to worldly things that gave me false promises and basically just tried to manipulate me into thinking that I didn't have to create a relationship with God to find peace and comfort. So, oftentimes we fall into the illusion that we as humans are self-sufficient, okay? And that we're capable of carrying ourselves. But it is through our very sufferings and our troubles that God is able to strip away this illusion. It's an illusion, okay, that we are self-sufficient, because we are not self-sufficient. We are very, very dependent on God, okay? And God, in his kindness, he uses suffering not to crush us and not to destroy us, but he uses suffering to remind us that us believing that we are self-sufficient and we are good enough as humans to solve our own problems and our sufferings, that is all false and that is all an illusion. It is in His mercy that He doesn't allow us to seek comfort in shaky foundations, in worldly things that promises security, satisfaction, or stability that will ultimately fail us. And I actually came to this truth when all these worldly things that I had turned to during the midst of my loneliness had failed me. At first, um, I won't get into the actual worldly things, but when I had turned to these, yeah, sure. At first, I was happy. I was like, wow, I'm actually happy for once. I don't feel lonely. I don't feel isolated. I feel like I have people, like I actually feel like there's people in my life who love me now. But it was those very people that I had turned to who were worldly and weren't God given that betrayed me in the end. And so what happened is I was here before I had turned to these worldly things during my moments, during my sufferings. And then after this false promise of worldly things, I had just dropped down even more. So now I was even more further away from God. The distance between us was larger. And so, when suffering comes, I put it here too. When suffering comes, don't see it as God abandoning you, okay? But it is rather God reminding you of where your true strength lies. He is drawing you back to Himself. In my during that moment of isolation, I was all the way over here, and God was still in His same position, and I felt like, wow, I am so sinful. I have too many sins that I cannot afford to go back there. That I'm not worthy enough, that I'm not good enough, right? But it is because of God that He draws you back to Him, okay? It is through Him that He draws you back like this. And He keeps you from empty substitutes. What do I mean by empty substitutes? These worldly things. These worldly things that you turn to when you feel like you're doubting yourself, when you have these self-doubt moments, when you have self-hate, when you start hating yourself, you start having these negative thoughts. And through it all, Christ is enough because His strength is made perfect in our weakness. So, the next reason that I put up here is God's purpose. The Bible tells us that we are fellow heirs of Jesus Christ, with Jesus Christ. We are sons and daughters of the living God through the gospel. And because of this relationship, the all-powerful, the all-knowing, the almighty ruler of the universe is also a father of mercy and comfort. And so I want you guys, what I realized when I was going through my trouble was that the things that I had turned to, they weren't comforting at all, right? It was all a facade, and it was all just false. It was too good to be true, is what I'm trying to say. And so it's here in Romans that Paul tells us that God comforts us in all of our troubles, in all of our sufferings, amidst all of our pain and misery, so that we are never alone in our sufferings. But with His comfort comes His purpose. And this is where I've put it. As we turn to Christ for comfort and hope amidst our suffering, He wants and He encourages us to comfort others who are burdened by the same sufferings that you are going through. And how do we do that? How do we comfort others through their sufferings that are the same as us. We give them the very same comfort that God gave us when we were going through that suffering. And so, the comfort of God that we receive when we're suffering is it's not just a gift that we receive. It's not something for us to just take and then we continue living on. Rather, it's a calling to share. As He has carried us in our pain and in our misery, we are sent to carry others in their pain and in their misery. And as we walk together through suffering, so humans and humans, when we walk together through our suffering, we become living testimonies that Christ's love never fails. His mercy never runs dry, and his presence never leaves us. So I didn't have much time, especially like allocated time to continue, but that's what I want you guys to get out of through my very short testimony is that not only does God show us that we need him, and it's a good thing to need him. Why? Because He's almighty, He's all powerful, He's all knowing. He knows what we need in order to get out of the trials and tribulations that we are going through. No one else does. No one else understands ourselves the way that God understands us. And second, God comforts us so that we can comfort others. And together, we become, through our sufferings and through our pain, all of that, we become living testimonies for God and for Christ's love. And so, ka testimony ki chimi tungin boy ba ni kutsa and beg on hasa.